So welcome to our workshop, Our Place. I'd like to firstly do my own personal acknowledgement of country. I'm in Brisbane, so I'd like to recognise the Yagara and Turrbal peoples on whose land I live, work and play. Perhaps you could have a think about whose country you're meeting on today. And if all goes well, in about 15 or so minutes, Uncle Tice from Rural Tours and from the Sunny Coast may join us and do a welcome to country. He's a very busy man, so if it turns out he can't join us, then I'm sure many of our speakers will do an acknowledgement of country, including Ross Williams, who'll be joining us later. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping and tell you a little bit about the Australian Earth Laws Alliance and why we're hosting this wonderful event and why it's part of a longer term series of really important gatherings. So a bit of housekeeping. If you've never used Zoom before, please don't be worried or frightened. It's a very humane system. My main suggestion is please keep yourself on mute. At the moment, you have no choice. When you came into this meeting, it was set for mute, and we'll keep it that way until question time in that first opening up session so that there's not too much noise or confusion. But what you can do, even though I'm sharing screen, is if you press escape, you can still see what's going on your own computer. And if you want to go to the web page about this presentation, about this workshop, then just click on the Earth Laws Alliance website. I'll put it in the, actually James, if you could perhaps put that link into the chat box, that would be great. This same Zoom link will be open all afternoon. You, of course, are welcome to come and go, turn it off, wander off, turn your video off, fold your clothes, pat your dog. That's the good thing about Zoom or online work is we can all be together, listening, sharing in the comfort of our own home. That said, however, we will have an official tea break from 2:20 to 2:35. I thought we can't be together in person, but we can enjoy a communal moment of eating, drinking and sharing. In addition to keeping yourself on mute, if you find that you've got a low internet connection, you might want to turn your video off as well. That's all good. And we did make a very simple introductory guide to Zoom on our webpage, and I just got some nice feedback that somebody read it, and in fact it worked for them. So there you go. But very quickly, for those of you who are new to Zoom, the mute button is here. Later, when we ask for questions, we may have time, depending on how many folks are on the call, for you to ask them verbally, but we would strongly encourage that you use the chat box, which I can show you. To go to the chat box, just click on that, and you'll see on your screen a little chat box pop up. This is your on and off for video. And just a reminder for speakers only, this is the share screen button. And then when you're ready to leave Zoom altogether, you can click the end meeting button. That may seem basic to those of you who use Zoom a lot, but I know it can be scary if it's new. I'm just going to quickly go into our website and just to remind people about our lovely lineup of human folks today. Again, if you've not been to the web page with the material on it, we do have information about like the flyer and how to book. But the program is here. Because they've all been so busy in the lead up to this event, we didn't do beautiful photos and bios, but we're going to have a lovely page after the event with everyone's bios, copies of presentations if folks are keen to share, audio recordings, and any other references and materials. But I'll be trying to keep us to time, especially myself. You'll see on that program that we've kind of got 3 sessions as well as an Arvo break. We're going to start with my introduction and some Indigenous perspectives on caring for country. And then we're going to go to Professor Ian Lowe, Susie Chapman, and Sandra Tujugna. I'm so sorry, I just messed that up. To Sandra, wonderful Sandra, who'll tell us how, I should have said her name, to talk about an overview of the bioregion and subregions. Then we'll have our break. And then we'll have a wonderful discussion about biodiversity. You can see the names of our lovely folks there, Narelle, Joel, Spencer, Megan, Rex, and Sue. So the program is pretty full. We'll try to keep to time. If we slip a few minutes, that'll be about it. And hopefully we'll be able to continue without getting too late. Now I'm a victim of my own sharing screen. Please hold. Back in. Right, there we are. So today's online forum, it's really just all about sharing knowledge about nature, the nature that is in, on, above, under, and along the Sunshine Coast. Why? And in particular, why is AELA, the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, interested in doing this kind of stuff? If you can let me for a moment be indulgent and tell you about our organisation. We were created in 2012, originally by a group of lawyers who were very concerned about the role that law plays in allowing great harm occur to the living world. Over the years though, and within the first couple of years, we built our work into a theory called Earth jurisprudence, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is actually a lot more than law. It's about those underpinning governance structures across a society. And our particular focus, because a lot of us are lawyers or people in sort of current disciplines and professions, we look at law, economics, education, ethics, the arts, and a whole range of multidisciplinary projects. We are first and foremost interested in systems change. And the reason we're interested in systems change is, as we've been watching, and I've turned 50, I will turn 50 this year, decades and decades and decades of reports telling us that the condition of the living world continues to deteriorate. What we're very interested in is how we can shift what I would call Western civilization or industrialized societies from a human-centered worldview that kind of gives us permission to use up the living world because we think it's all for us, and shift us back to what Indigenous and First Nations and other cultures have always known, which is that we are merely just one part of the living world. And that's a privilege that we should be aware of and really respecting and caring for the living world much more significantly than we do now. One of our big areas within the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, as folks who are interested in systems change, is how do we challenge this very new and very destructive notion of growth economics? Most Indigenous cultures saw the world very differently, whether it was circular time or the fact that plants and animals were relatives, the fact that it was about sustainable harvest of anything, whereas the culture that has led to current globalized economic approaches really doesn't see the world that way. So what part can we play, particularly folks who are descendants of the European settlers in this continent, to reverse this way of thinking and to think something different? That is a big mess to show you that AELA works across a whole range of areas on changing culture, connecting governance, building community, and creating alternatives. We work on, we've helped auspice the New Economy Network. We work on rights of nature, the Australian People's Justice Tribunal for Justice. But the reason we have invited folks to come together today is because of an initiative that we've nicknamed GreenPrints, and I'll tell you why. And the nickname stuck, and we quite like it. So GreenPrints is all about finding the stepping stones and the pathway to bring all the good stuff together so that we can, in fact, live within ecological limits. The reason we've been working on the governance and law side is that as lawyers, we could see that the older 1990s version of sustainable development is flawed. The government accepted a model of sustainability that valued, based on human values, environment, society, and economic as equal partners in human success. Unfortunately, this idea of balancing the three pillars of sustainability always led over the last couple of decades to the economy being privileged. And there's lots of examples of that in law, in policy, in administration of modern societies. And of course, unfortunately, all of the great efforts of all of the people around Australia inside of an ESD model, it hasn't stopped the ongoing destruction, whether it's land clearing, biodiversity loss, climate change. Obviously, a lot of folks know that nested sustainability, the idea that we accept the environment, is giving us outer limits and we have to fit inside that, has been an idea around for a very long time. And what we've been looking at within AELA is what role can the broader underpinning governance structures play in bringing together and weaving back together the really good work that's been started over many decades, but has been kind of diluted in the last 20 years, particularly with climate change misinformation. So the big question that we're interested in, and this workshop fits in because it's really just the first step in exploring a particular place, you know, how do we live within our limits? I'm going to move really quickly now through these last few slides because we started a bit later. How do we live within our limits? The question we often pose is, even if we all woke up tomorrow, completely committed to having industrialized societies live within healthy ecological limits, how would we do it? It seems so big and so difficult. One of the big influences for us is the development of Earth system science, particularly in the early 21st century. And in 2009, the concept of planetary boundaries, which many of you would know about. And if you're not familiar with it, you know, I really recommend you jump on the internet and you can find the original articles and lots of literature since, which talks about, for the first time, we actually have the capacity to understand what kind of foundational rules the planet has to keep life on Earth going. You can see some of the headings there around climate change, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone. Due to NASA and all the wonders of modern society, we've been able to get a much better handle on what those boundaries are for a safe operating space for humanity. But in the work we do within Earth jurisprudence, which has got a very local focus, it's all about connecting to place and understanding place. The big question was, well, how do we help people think about sustainability a little differently, but still weave together all the incredible work that everybody on this call, I'm sure, has already been doing for a long time. Bioregions are an interesting point to just help people with the thinking exercise of how we understand what Mother Nature is telling us. And I know I'm so grateful to have Ian Lowe on our call. He's going to talk about bioregions in a moment. But the fact that Western science has a way of saying, well, roughly speaking, this is kind of what Mother Nature is telling us about herself. Whether you're looking up in the little green bits up in the Daintree and know that's a forest and a rainforest, or you're looking over here and you know that's a desert, Mother Nature has ways of telling us what she is, what's going on in a particular place. But as you'll see from these straight lines, modern Australian politics and economics actually doesn't pay much attention. There's a disconnect between what Aboriginal people and scientists and local people like yourselves know about a place and the kinds of rules and laws that were brought over in 1788 and have continued to be unfitting for the modern times. And interestingly, the Aboriginal map of Australia, and what Ross will talk about, is the landscape-based governance system that people had, continues today. And very clearly what we're talking about is how mainstream Australia, how non-Indigenous Australia can connect with place and more respectfully live and have its own governance system within that. That said, we work very closely with a number of Indigenous colleagues, particularly Ross will be on the call soon, Mary Graham, an incredible philosopher about Aboriginal governance and societies. Together, we have a sister organisation called Future Dreaming Australia. It's very, very important to us. Whatever we do with an earth-centred way of thinking in Australia has to suit the local environment, but has to fit in to how we live on this continent, this colonised place, and how we find ways to work together that are fair and just. So back to the bioregions, the GreenPrints process is just stepping stones to help people gather together all of the great work that's been done by scientists and others over the last couple of decades and rethink how we fit ourselves into the picture. Where do we live? How do we know about a place? What does health even look like in a bioregion or our local place? So much has been changed, we often forget what it used to look like. What are the scenarios for rebuilding, restoring, or caring for what we have? And then very importantly, and of course this image reflects the nested sustainability, how do we fit human societies into, rather than just plowed across the top of, the health of the living world? And one of the big parts of this jigsaw puzzle is how do we live within our limits when we've got an economy that is geared for the opposite. We have an economy that's geared towards and absolutely promotes material growth and endless material growth on a finite planet. So I'm pleased to say that for the last 4.5 years, myself and many other colleagues, now we have hundreds and hundreds of members and thousands of people connecting into this New Economy Network Australia, which is about looking at a better way to recreate or to reimagine and transition our societies to live within our limits. And then the lawyers come in at the end. So we find that really helpful. People say, oh, what law reform should we do now? It's like, well, the whole legal system came from a different mindset and the wrong way round. If we look at country first, and if we care for country first and rearrange ourselves, then you can tweak legal systems. And I'm pleased to say that we've had a number of great lawyers working with us to think about the small things you can do to unpick and re-sew current systems and the big picture stuff for different systems. So GreenPrints is a pathway, and we've got a lot of information on it, but we're only just got our brand new website up. It's a bit, it hasn't got everything we wanted on it by today. If you want to know more about it, please visit our main website, the Earth Laws Alliance. And by early next week, we'll have a lot more up on our little GreenPrints website, which we're super proud of. And one thing I don't have much time to talk about is we're making a really simple front-end tool for ordinary humans to use so that they can access the incredible thousands of data sets around Australia that tell them about the living world. But if you're not a scientist, it can be hard to understand. That's some of our wonderful QUT students who have been working on setting up some of that. And now I'd like to, with great joy, stop talking and very quickly hand over to Pollyanna. I'm unmuting right now, I think. Can you unmute yourself, Pollyanna? Thank you. So the reason we're starting, this is our very first sort of workshop focusing in on a place that is then steps into other conversations, new economy symposia, law and regulation conversations. We're playing with these lovely humans at the sunny coast because we went out and about to find who might be interested in this. A couple of different groups were, but this group of champions really were quite excited about it. And I'll just hand over to Pollyanna for a minute or two to share.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here. It's actually really thrilling that so many people have come along to this and really heartening. So I'm Pollyanna, I'm the CEO of Tree Sisters Australia and also one of the people who helped bring this group of Sunny Coast GreenPrints together. So one of the reasons this came about is because there are a number of us who were fed up and also exhausted with pushing back against inappropriate development and ecological destruction that's been happening a lot on the Sunshine Coast. There's a really strong push for development. And when I first met Michelle and heard about the rights of nature and some of the possibilities that are there that are outside of that framework, it just became really obvious that doing something like GreenPrints that gives us a path forward that is a whole different way of thinking and a whole different paradigm to just pushing against stuff that we don't want to happen. That's really how this was born in this area, is to try and provide another framework that we can all get behind in order to create a different reality for the Sunshine Coast, where we are able to live with the incredible, beautiful place that we live. So I want to say before I go, a huge gratitude and thanks to Michelle and to all of the helpers at the Earth Laws Alliance, because Michelle has amazing energy and is very dynamic and fantastic ideas and has really helped us to pull all of this together. So thank you, Michelle, very much. And also big thanks to the other people who are in the GreenPrints Sunny Coast group for staying the distance and hanging in there and helping all of this to come together. Thanks, Michelle.